I'd like to introduce Marty Sullaway NN1C. Uh, Marty is an 18-year-old radio aficionado living in Eastern Massachusetts. In addition to his university studies, he's also a technology specialist, consultant, and a customer support contractor for various locations around Boston. Marty frequently delivers amateur radio digital content to radio club meetings, such as this one, podcasts, or printed material to trying to admit people. Sorry about that, Marty. Trying to admit people or provides printed material to the National Contest Journal, CQ Magazine, and various other media channels. However, when it comes to amateur radio operation, he's an avid contester. Marty has operated numerous high-end contest stations, both as single operator and as part of a multi-operator team. Recent accolades include first place, US and VE, both modes, at the ARRL DX Unlimited Low Power, and he claimed first place World Unlimited Low Power in CQ WPX SSB this year. Marty enjoys digital, CW, and SSB operations, and is a proud member, life member of CW Ops. His number is 2276. If that weren't enough, Marty serves as the ARRL Assistant Director, New England Division. He supports the field organization in all matters related to media communications and technology. Marty is currently an electrical and computer engineering student at Northeastern University and is always finding time to tinker on a new project. Marty, the floor is yours. Take it away, please.
Well, thank you so much, and it's great to be here with you guys. I'm going to warn you in advance. I warned Jim, and I'll warn you guys. My audio is lagging. My video is lagging my audio, so by the time I stop talking, you can watch my lips move in silence for a couple of minutes. I'm sorry in advance. Well, it's great to be here with all of you. I'm very fortunate that right now to be able to talk to a club and meet a new group of people is just a matter of logging onto the Zoom screen, and it's been really quite fun to listen to your meeting and hearing about all the cool stuff you guys are doing from CW chats and whatnot. It sounds like you guys do a lot of great stuff here. And it's really exciting for me to be here. So I got an email from W4IU way back a while ago saying, hey, so one of my club members saw you present, I believe, at Contest University. Can you talk about youth and contesting and all that stuff? And I said, sure, I'd love to. So the way I want to do this is I'm going to talk a little bit. I have some slides prepared. It's actually a modification of that talk I gave at Contest University. And then I want to talk to you. We can do some question and answer, and you can ask me anything. I don't care, if it's directly related to the slides or not, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. Without further ado, would it be possible to enable screen sharing for me? I'm getting a nice.
Should have it now.
There we go. Okay. Can you see the screen?
We can, Marty. Thank you.
Great. Okay, let me just drag some windows around here so I can see you guys, because you're the people I'm talking to and not just the screen. Okay, so CTU formally presents, as I like to say, youth contesting and everywhere in between. So the way this is going to work, as I alluded to, is I'm going to talk a little bit about myself for a minute, just so you know who I am. I'm going to run through some slides, then we'll talk, because we're hams, and that's what hams tend to do. I have a feeling that you guys have some questions for me, and if you don't, I can keep on talking, and eventually we'll have something in common to talk about, and it should be a really fun time. This is a great audience. You guys seem really engaged and excited and focused, and I see some familiar faces and some new faces, and that's awesome.
Hey, Marty.
Yep.
Give me a second. I'm gonna try and mute everybody, and then I'll unmute you. And that way, we won't have any distracting background noises.
Sure. Oops.
Oh, great. No, I can't do that.
I believe I can talk.
Yes.
Great.
Go ahead.
Great. Cool. So, is my screen still shared and all?
Yes.
Is that working? Good. Okay, cool. I don't see the normal box that pops up. So, so this is just kind of a quick rundown. I want to talk about youth and amateur radio, some entry pathways, some of the stuff that's going on with young people in contesting, a few thoughts on just bringing people into contesting, and then I always ask a favor at the end of every time I talk, and this is no exception. I have a favor to ask of you guys. So without that, a little bit about me. That was a very nice biography you read there. So this is a little bit of a review, but I'm primarily a contester. I do both single op and multi-operator contesting. I used to be known as KC1CWF, but that was too long, so NN1C sounded shorter. I'm both a single operator. I've kind of been lucky to operate some big stations. I currently frequently drive the W1KM station, and I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. And I'm a member of the KC1XX multi-operator team. We have had a lot of success in that, and that's been a blast. And I'm also part of a conglomerate that works to support the ZF1A contest station on Grand Cayman Island. And I hold Zulu Fox 2 Lima Zulu as my call sign down there. And we try and get down there at least 3 or 4 times a year to do some contesting, although this year we're having obviously that is not so. And then by day I'm an electrical engineering student and work on the startup scene and mainly as a hardware developer. So I thought I'd throw together a montage of a couple photos of me and amateur radio to try and describe a little bit of what I do. So the top photo shows me doing what I love on a 150 feet on a radio tower overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. One of the key, if you know anything about vertical antennas, they work real well in salt water. So this is actually in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, at the station of W1KM, about 50 miles south of Boston. He sits on the Atlantic Ocean, and you can see growing out of my back of my head are full-size 80-meter verticals in a 4-square array. That's our transmit antenna on 80 meters, and at high tide, the water is going over the bases of the verticals, and they work really quite well. You can see, so that's the station is pictured below my face, and then to the left is myself operating a contest at K1IR a few years ago, and up top is, I think that picture was taken around 3:30 in the morning, setting up for a contest in ZF in Grand Cayman Island, where we arrive and we get to work and work real hard to make sure everything works, and sometimes that means it's 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning when the station's all ready to go. So I just got a kick out of that picture. Thought I'd throw it in. With that being said, we're off to the races here. So this is a slide. If any of you here have ever heard me talk about youth and amateur radio, I always start with the why, because I think the why always drives everything that we do, and I like to base everything I do in data, in science, and in reality, because I think that prepares us to kind of be able to measure our progress and what we're doing well and what we need to improve on. So this is a chart of the age distribution of CW Ops members by birth year. And you can see that it starts out around 1930. It's pretty low, and it has this big growth and a peak around 1945, and then steadily rolls off to soon after 1985, where it's basically at a smaller level than those born before pre-1930. So this is the age distribution graph of the CW Ops Club membership, which I think is a fairly representative graph of the contesting and HF populace. So what we could do when we know this, and we know the average lifespan of the sort of people who are in that club, we can predict what the future of the club looks like. We call that the problem, because when we think about how they're going to age, we can look at what the population is going to look like over time, and that's what this chart shows. This chart shows the population of the CW Ops Club in blue as we move through time, and then in red we see uh, uh, the number of people in the club that are still alive. So what we can take out of this is if you go out to 2035, which sounds like a long time from now, that's really only 15 years. We see that the majority of the club is gone, right? So this is not a 40 years from now problem. This is not a 70 years from now problem. We are an older demographic and are aging. So getting younger people enthused about the hobby and beyond involved, understanding and be able to take on leadership roles is going to become very important in the next, say, 15 to 20 years. So if that big blob up top was the what I call the problem, I know we can talk about the solution. That's way down there. It's actually even further right of that, because that solution circle is 1990 to 2000. I wasn't even born in 2000. I was born in 01. So if you want to feel ancient, there you go. But the solution is somewhere way down there. So now you know that believe it or not, we need to get some young people involved in this hobby, right? Because we all love it. It means a lot. I think every radio ham I know says it means a lot to them, and they've learned a lot from it, and they're better for it. And I'm no exception. I certainly wouldn't be an electrical engineering student, working in a company dealing with RF all the time, if not for amateur radio, if not for all the people I've gotten to meet and the great experiences I've had and opportunities to speak like this one. So there's some like common entry points I like to talk about that might seem fairly obvious, but I like to point them out. Where I see young people entering the hobby, and this is all opinion, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but this is my theory. The three main places I see young people coming in are STEM, contesting, and MCOM. Now, I actually wouldn't suggest that these are the only ways. They're just the three main kind of pillars that I've seen in my experience. So STEM is just, the science of amateur radio is just so overbearing. What we do is playing with the ionosphere, learning about propagation, and building radios, and coming up with that new technologies. Amateur radio has always been kind of the testing ground for things that we see in the commercial world years later. I remember a couple of years ago hanging out with a radio ham who's working on designing an amplifier using a new modulation scheme for very high efficiency transmitters at a very low cost. And now, 7 years later, 5 years later, that technology is actually being built into broadcast transmitters. So we see amateur radio as this scientific playground all the time. In the reverse of that, we know that there's so many, complex or kind of theoretical concepts that that students see in the classroom that can be brought into amateur radio and made very accessible. For example, my favorite example of this is Doppler Shift. In every high school physics class in America, kids learn about Doppler Shift. And it sounds a little confusing, what is that? But think about it, if anybody's ever made a QSO on a satellite, they've wrestled with Doppler shift. As the satellite passes overhead, the frequency shifts that, on the downlink, if it's a UHF, or on the uplink, you get my point. So there's all these scientific crossovers in amateur radio. I was recently working with a physics class that wanted to contact the ISS and ask questions. And understand. They wanted to understand meteorology, and they made a high altitude balloon. And I actually don't know anything about that. And there's people here in this club who know a lot more, so I won't go on that tangent. But there's this obvious STEM technology crossover, right? And then I think about, why am I drawn to contesting? Why am I a contester? Why do I like it? And the takeaway I have for myself is it's this activity that's a challenge, and there's feedback. It's very easy to know in contesting how you're going. You look at your scores after a weekend. Did I do better than last time? Did I do worse than last time? Am I above the competition? Am I below the competition? And for me, seeing feedback and how I do is very important because it drives me to improve and it drives me to get better. Maybe last weekend I made 30 contacts. Maybe next week I'm going to make 40. Let's scale that up. Maybe, at a very high level, maybe last time I was 7th place. Next time I'm going to be 2nd place. Uh, um, Contesting is this great challenge. Some people describe it as a video game. I'm not sure if that analogy holds, but it combines. If you look at the people who win contests, they're technical. They have a social understanding of it. It's a dedication thing. So I think when I think of people I've met who have been drawn into amateur radio, they've seen people drawn into what is this contest thing you do, but then they discover everything else, and that's the point. I think every entry point to amateur radio is normally not the end of somebody's amateur radio journey. It's oftentimes a gateway drug to other facets. And then obviously MCOM, it's one of the more public faces of amateur radio. You see people doing walkathons and bikeathons and all these different events and, wearing a radio. I have friends from high school who got involved to fulfill community service hours. One of my friends who became involved in high school volunteering for bikeathons is now working at NASA Jet Propulsion Labs because of ham radio. So I always like to say, these are places where I see youth coming into the hobby, but they're certainly not all inclusive. So then this is obviously about youth and contesting. I just wanted to breeze through some thoughts on programs that are drawing youth who are either not already in ham radio into ham radio and contesting in particular, and also some programs that are taking kids who are already involved in ham radio. Maybe they know a lot about contesting, maybe they don't, and they're bringing them up to the next level. And I always like to talk about these because they're kind of near and dear to my heart, and obviously from this talk, which I said I revised slightly. So the first program I always like to talk about because it's kind of the original youth and ham radio contesting program. It's called Youngsters on the Air, or YODA, and it's based in IARU Region 1, which, if you're not familiar, is in Europe. And what they do is they take kids. I don't care if you've made 10 contacts or 10 million, and they throw them all in a room. So now you have a bunch of people in a room who may or may not have contesting skills. And you bring them to one of a huge contest station somewhere in Europe, and with no adult support, they say, "Go free, make contacts, go contest," and it's amazing to see what these experiences have been like for kids. This program has been hugely successful in converting kids who know a little bit about ham radio or a lot into groups of friends that are knowledgeable and experienced, and I think it's really cool. So I always like to talk about that. This picture here is taken by my friend Tomi HA8RT with a group of 5 friends that I don't think he actually ever met before. By the end of the weekend, they were pals, and everybody got better and learned a little bit and got to do some antenna work and make some contest cues and had a lot of fun. And if you're not having fun, you're doing it all wrong, as I like to say. So I always show that. Now, the incarnation of this program in the U.S. was manifested in something called Youth on the Air. And we originally had a camp planned for this June, which was canceled because of COVID. But the idea is somewhat similar, taking kids from around the U.S. who are already licensed radio hams and bringing them together for a week of fun and learning about all the different segments of amateur radio, be it contesting or kit building or anything like that. And I was actually tapped to lead the contesting workshop for that. But that's just a fantastic experience, because I think one of the things that's unfortunate, and we're trying to remedy really, is that there's a lot of young people get in ham radio and they don't immediately find other people their age, or they don't find other people who they can relate to. I've been very fortunate that I enjoy hanging out with people who are a little bit older than me, who have different life experiences. But for a lot of people, that's a turnoff, right? If you look around at your average amateur radio club, I think you'd see more the lack of hair or gray hair than younger folk. I think when you bring people together, it shows that there are people who look like me. There are people who have similar experiences. Here are these people who are doing ham radio and studying for tests in high school. And I think whenever people kind of can see people who have done what they're doing or are doing similar things, it's empowering. So that's kind of the theory of YODA. And then another program I always like to speak of is the David Coulter Youth Memorial Expedition. And this is a program that whips up kids from around the world and flies them to normally the Caribbean for a week of DXing fun. It's another chance to just improve contest skills. But it's really not getting kids into amateur radio, it's just improving. So I always like to mention them because they do good work. And then my personal pet 501c3 nonprofit is an organization called Team Exuberance. And what we do is we are the opposite end of the spectrum from getting kids involved. We are kind of we like to think of ourselves as a demonstration team for what young people can do, and setting a bar. We're a group of young people all under the age of 20 that compete very in high levels of amateur radio contesting and multi-operator contests. We started a year and a half ago, operating the CQ WPX contest, multi-2 category from the K3LR contest station, and won the U.S. And we're continually trying to draw new people in and show that the young guns can do it. The young guns can be successful in contesting. And if you look right now, we're leading up to the World Radio Sport Team Championship. If you look at the person who's number one in the whole world in qualifying points for the WRTC, you'll see that he's 23. In the top 10, I think 4 of the top 10 are under 25, and 10 out of the top 30 are under 30 or 35. So there are plenty of young people in contesting who love it, and I hope even more will become involved. So this is just a spattering of some of the operators that Team Exuberance has brought in. You see me with my feet up in my sweatpants on a Sunday afternoon in the middle of a contest because I get tired, believe it or not. And the notion of kicking your feet up on the desk and running some stations sounds like fun. You see Violetta Cam 4ATT in the bottom left there. She actually lives in a community without internet, like an Amish community, and learned ham radio without ever meeting other hams except her family. On the right, there's David VE7DZO in the bottom, who lives in a place in British Columbia where there are more moose than humans. The ratio, I think he said, was 3-to-1. And erecting his tower was very difficult because he would build the beam on the ground and prop it up to, put on another element and go to sleep for the night. And wildlife would rip it up. And then at the top, you see my friend Tommy H8RT at WRTC 2018. And on the top right, Tommy was on the top left. You see Bryant, KG5HVO, a dear friend of mine, also at WRTC 2018. So the faces of amateur radio contesting today are diverse. And we all come from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, different backgrounds, different schoolings. If there's one observation I made about youth and ham radio, there's a huge overrepresentation of kids who are homeschooled. And I don't know if that's because the homeschooled kids have more time or access to more resources or what that is, but of the people who are involved in Team Exuberance, I was actually the only person who went to a traditional school. I know there's a lot of great school-based clubs out there, but it's just a kind of a fascinating data point that I've seen that there's a huge overrepresentation of homeschooled kids in amateur radio, which is great. It's just an interesting observation. So I think they're an interesting group to target, right? Because they have flexible schedules and different objectives, and it's kind of easier to work in. So I always like to point that out whenever I talk. Next, let's see here. This is just a little bit of details on what we do at Team Exuberance. We won worldwide phone in 2019 and are postponed to 21. And we fundraise so that kids from all over can come and hang out and learn and improve for free. We're a 501c3. Your donation is tax deductible. If you want to do something really nice, if you go to teamexuberance.org, you can make a donation. That's about all the plugging I'm going to do for that. So younger people in radio sport. I mentioned it already. I talked about those kids who do WRTC like me and like me at the top. The team that won WRTC in Boston in 2014. Dan, I'm trying to think. They're both under 40. There's a distinction that I like to make, which is there's no reason that we have to be focusing our outreach efforts to kids. There's no issues in targeting 20s, 30s, and 40s too. And I think getting those people involved. Contesting presents an interesting opportunity, and it's my passion, so that's why I speak so fascinated about it. But it's really, it's very interesting when you look at the population of amateur radio and the kind of the distribution of what people are interested in. You'll see that there's a lot of talk about DXCC and contesting and CW and FT8 and those sort of things. But when you look at the distribution of licensed radio amateurs in the U.S., you see that first 500,000 of them are all technicians, right? So none of them do any of this stuff. And when you look at the CQ Worldwide contest, the biggest contest of the year, normally attracts around 10,000 log entries, right? So you got to think, if 10,000 people send in logs, maybe 40,000 people, 50,000 people, 100,000 people make QSOs, in the world, that's a small fraction of the U.S. amateur radio population means they're engaged with that, right? So I actually did an analysis a while ago where I took all the published logs from the CQ Worldwide, which is kind of the biggest contest of the year. I found all the unique call signs up in there from around the world, and the number is artificially high. And we know from experience that around half the unique call signs in a contest that are logged are actually bad, busted, inaccurate call signs, miscopied call signs. But the number was sub 50,000. So I talk about contesting. I claim it's the best thing ever, but I always like to remind people that it's actually a very small part of the hobby. So I like to point that out at the end here. Contesting is just one element of the hobby. It's one angle. It's one thing to talk about, but it's the thing I love. So I always like to point it out. So what do I ask? I always ask the same thing at the end of every presentation I give. I say, I just got an email today from somebody who's a new ham, a friend of a friend's brother. And he said, I went to an amateur radio club. I took my test, and they immediately told me that I was not welcome here. And I know for a fact that you guys are such a welcoming group, but I always like to end by reminding all of us that we are all the faces of amateur radio. We are all Elmers. We are all PR people, and it's our duty, like it or not, to be welcoming and available and offer resources to anybody who asks. Because I think, as somebody very eloquently said when at the beginning of this presentation, at the beginning of this meeting, talking about test sessions, it really pains us when we have to say, we would love to give you an amateur radio test. Come back in a month, maybe you'll get your reservation. And I think welcoming people and opening with open arms and with full resources is what we need to ensure the next generation. So I just gave you a little bit of spiel about my hobby that I love here in amateur radio, which is contesting. You know that it's only a small segment of the real world of amateur radio and everything there is to offer. But I hope you take away from this a little bit of an understanding of why I love contesting, what it's given me, what use things are out there, and that, I always end with saying amateur radio is the best hobby in the world, and it opens doors and changes lives, and I truly believe that. I can't stress the connections and people I've met through amateur radio as a kid, and how that shaped me, permanently. I currently do research in a lab that studies ionospheric propagation, and I'd never be doing that if not for amateur radio. The people you meet, the places you get to go, amateur radio is the best hobby in the world, and I'm really happy to be sharing my love story with contesting and the programming that's out there with you here this evening. So now you've heard the ranting part of the program. You've heard me yak, and now I want to hear from you, because I think you guys all have life experiences and stories and questions, and maybe I said something that got you excited, or maybe I said something that you disagree with or you thought was stupid, and I'd love to hear about it and engage with you. There are 57 of you here and only one of me, so I guarantee you at least one of you has something you want to ask or throw out there or discuss, and I'd love to hear it. So the floor is yours. I'm now your punching bag.
I have a question.
Question.
What drew you to amateur radio?
That is a good question, and if I got a penny for every time somebody asked that question, I would be a wealthy man. And if I got $1 for every time I had a good answer for that, I'd still be broke because I don't have a good answer. I discovered amateur radio on the internet, and I don't know how, and it's one of the great sadnesses of my amateur radio story, because I would love to be able to tell people how I got into amateur radio, but the truth of the matter is I actually don't quite know. I believe I found it on the internet after watching a TV show about preppers, emergency preparedness, which is actually something that I have done fairly little in an amateur radio, a little bit, but not really. My initial amateur radio experiences were all on 2 meters, rag chewing, talking with the locals, and that's where I learned a lot. That's where I learned, how an antenna works and what a dipole is, and why can't I just take a big coil and hook it up and work the world, and how do you make a QSO, and what does 73 mean? Because I can say, as somebody who never met a radio ham before I took my license exam and studied essentially from taking practice tests, when you pass the test and get your amateur radio license, that's really just the permission to start learning, not the end. I knew the more I learn I don't know. And amateur radio is such a vast hobby, and nobody can truly know anything. But there are, obviously opportunities to always learn more and gain new skills and experiences. And I'm very lucky that I get to travel a lot for amateur radio, and I've operated with stations around the world, and it's just the best hobby ever. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no. No, that's very good. It's obvious that you found something you really like, which is really good. I hope other people can also find it and realize that, yeah, this hobby has something for everybody. If you just find out about the whole thing to begin with.
Oh yeah. There's I like to say I've dabbled in a lot of things, and I haven't dabbled in more things than I've dabbled in. This hobby runs from 160-meter DXing to, making QSOs at 47 gigahertz, to bouncing signals off the moon, hanging out with your buddies on FT8, restoring boat anchors, and anything in between. There is truly something for everybody in amateur radio.
Hey, Marty.
Hi.
I saw you'd flashed up on the slide, and excuse me if I missed it. You said you were contesting since 2015.
Yes.
When were you licensed first?
I was licensed in 2014.
Okay.
I was licensed back when we had sunspots.
Briefly, yeah.
Briefly.
Well, I worked you in the NAQP on sideband last weekend and 2 weekends ago on CW.
Uh-huh.
And when I say I worked you on CW, because CW has worked for me, but it sounds like you have it mastered. How did you master CW like you did?
I'm not a CW master.
Well, you sounded you were moving along pretty good, so I'm just curious.
I could make a claim that I was probably going pretty fast, but CW is a skill. It's not a it's a practice skill, and there's some people who are just magical at it. I am not. I have to practice very hard. I normally do 90 minutes of practice a day, 45 minutes in the morning, 45 minutes at night.
Wow.
And I do during contest season to stay in shape. I run in the morning, and then I practice CW. I use Morse Runner, if you're familiar with it. It's an application that simulates contests, and I try and make it as hard as I can. And I find that if I can overtrain with Morse Runner to do something that's harder than a contest, by the time you get to a contest, it's much easier. When you work to be at the NAA contest on CW, I was probably running on 2 bands at the same time, doing something that we now call 2BSIQ, which is synchronizing and interleaving 2 pileups on 2 different bands. And with Morse Runner, which is this training software, you can really replicate that. So I spend a lot of time practicing. I know one of the best contesters I know, likes to joke that he makes 25,000 fake contacts before CQ Worldwide every year, getting in shape. And I think, there's a lot of people who learn CW but then are nervous that to get on the air because it isn't perfect. And, none of our CW is perfect. And we make dumb mistakes all the time. And You just got to get out there and use it. It's this magical thing. It's long and short beeps to communicate really fast. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
The one thing I'd like to note about kind of the crossover with young people is I was very surprised how many young people do CW, and it seems kind of cool. And I've met friends who were actually drawn into CW. Oops, my camera. And then found amateur radio because there's something kind of cool and secretive and adventurous about Morse code, right? We can send these things and other people don't know about them. It's the ultimate teenager's trick. How can I talk to somebody and not have my parents figure out what I'm talking about? Doesn't get much better than that.
Well, I probably need to practice more. You're very modest because you do very well. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Who else has a gripe or
Marty?
or a question or anything?
Hi, Marty.
Hi. I can't see your face, but I'll switch pages and I'll probably find yours.
Well, I don't know. I somehow ended up in safe driving mode, and I don't know how I did it. So
Okay.
on Zoom. So it's okay.
There. What's your name?
Ian.
Oh, Ian.
This
there
is
you
Ian,
are.
November Victor 4 Charlie. I'm the
I
VE
like
guy
that. I like that call, and you had the best discussion about the difficulties of VE sessions I've heard in a long time. You are just great. So keep going.
Well, thank you.
I like
appreciate
you a lot
that.
already.
Well, so I've been VE. I've been licensed since 2007. I've been a VE since 2008. So I've been doing this for a week or two.
Yep.
One of my favorite things about being a VE, and I love all of it, of course,
Yep.
is when we get a youngster in to take a test, and I can hand the youngster a CSCE with a license class on it circled, not the nuns. So, and in fact, a couple of months ago, we had one of our younger members, Jack KM4ZIA, upgraded to his general.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure you know Jack. I know everybody else.
I do.
Everyone in the virtual room knows Jack. And
Who doesn't know Jack?
Right.
Jack's amazing.
Right. He just upgraded to general a couple of months ago, and it was a huge deal because he'd been practicing and studying
That's
hard,
awesome.
and he did very well, and it was a whole family affair for them. So that leads up to the hand grenade I'm going to toss you.
Hand grenade. Do I deflect it away before the pin?
I'm warning you. You get a warning shot. So as much as you do with contesting and other, a lot of the activities that you've mentioned are great for folks that are already into amateur radio.
Sure.
What do you do, and what are some of the activities you're involved in to help attract youth who maybe don't have other avenues to be exposed to amateur radio, and how are you helping bring youth into the hobby in general?
Right. That's not a hand grenade. That's a very reasonable question, right? I think that's it's always good to ask. What do I do personally, or what's out there? What do you want to just?
Well, a little both. What do you see that's out there, and how do you help encourage you personally help encourage?
So the thing I do personally is I like to. My big thing is if getting people involved in things that they don't realize is amateur radio until it's too late and they're already hooked in and have the poison. I teach introduction. I teach a class in Boston. It's a free class. Anybody who wants it could take it from me, which is Introduction to Electronics for middle schoolers. I teach 6th and 7th graders electronics, and we always do a CW transmitter kit, for example. And I think there are so many kids learn about electronics today in middle school and high school, and there's such focus in school today on project-based learning and STEM and doing things with kids' hands and not sitting still doing worksheets. That I think there's tremendous opportunities to get amateur radio in the classroom and partner with teachers who have the resources to get in front of kids. One of the hardest things these days is to get the attention of young people. We live busy lives. We're on social media. There's pressure to do 1,001 extracurriculars to get a perfect SAT score. The list goes on. I don't need to tell you that. I think oftentimes where we struggle in amateur radio is our messaging and our communication and our ability to brand ourselves as not a bunch of old guys, but really this innovative group of people who are doing, launching satellites into outer space. And You know, we are an innovative amateur radio houses so many innovative people, and I think sometimes when somebody says ham radio, they think of, you know, Uncle Jim in his basement with his, you know, Heath kits in the 70s. So I think hypothetically, I think how we brand it to the public and how we target target young people is important. But I can't stress enough that you know, I think it's kind of scary when you amateur radio sounds scary. Hi, you know, welcome to ham radio. You want to do anything? Here's a book you got to study. Okay, and then you got to sit in this room and take this test. You know, we amateur radio is often promoted as the after party to working really hard to get a license. I think exposing people to amateur radio without the pressure expectation that they're going to get a license, but that's something they can pursue if they want it, is perfectly okay. I could say in my classes where I've done stuff that's that involves amateur radio, the majority of people don't go for licenses, and I never pressure them to. But I think you know, the big and scary. It's like if you know, I take classes all day. I'm gonna get off this call today and do differential equations homework. You know, if somebody told me, you know, hey, here's another thing to study for, then maybe you can do some radio thing. That wouldn't sound so fun. So I think how we brand and talk about amateur radio and how we start people off is very important.
And I think I want to throw something in, Marty. I think
Sure.
to some extent you hit the nail on the head there. Is that you know, I think we've got the cart and the horse maybe backward to some extent, in that we start off, particularly with kids, you know, they hear that, oh, you've got to get a license and you've got to go do all this studying. And, you know, really what we should be starting them with, and I'll share some of my experience. My son's a teenager, he's in Boy Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a radio merit badge counselor.
Awesome.
I help teach that when our club is very involved. I don't want to think I'm puffing myself up. Our club as a whole is very, very, very actively involved in promoting radio to youth.
Yeah,
And
I've seen that. It's
you know,
very
guys
impressive.
like W4QO Jim Stafford, who is a few screens down from me on the Zoom tonight, and
I
is
see you.
one of our elder statesmen, if you will, and is very generous with opening his shack up to anybody that wants to come. Doesn't care how old you are.
Please don't use the word elder.
You're a group of good-looking young people here.
Jim, this is meant with all due devotion and respect, my friend. But you know, when you teach the merit badge, and I do that, you know, we teach at field day, and we do it for JOTA, and well, when we can have field days in JOTAs. When my son was in Cub Scouts, for JOTA, I had his Webelos den over to my house, and I pulled the shack basically out of the shack and put it in the driveway.
Yeah.
And said, we're gonna go make some, you know, we're gonna go talk to some people in other parts of the world, kind of thing. You know, we've got to figure out how we draw folks into that and draw youngsters into those kinds of activities, and then say, did you have fun? And if you had fun, there's more things you can do.
Here's some more next steps.
And let's, here's some next steps. But if you had fun, you know, get mom or dad to bring you to this club meeting, maybe, you know, when you don't have school the next day, maybe when, you know, you're on vacation. Or here's an activity we're doing this weekend. Have mom or dad come bring you out and come to this activity. Fun. And then if you still like it, here are your next steps to move forward. I think particularly with youngsters, we need to, you know, and I think our club does a pretty good job of that. And it kind of was, I was kind of trying to lead you a little bit into some of that discussion. So,
yeah, you know, I think there's a big missed opportunity on the national scale to be promoting amateur radio in a way that I think could be very meaningful. With some of the more national, larger scale organizations, that I think they've kind of missed the mark in promoting it.
Well, and I mean, I look at things like Yoda and the youth camp that you guys were going to put on this summer before, you know, the world turned upside down and topsy-turvy on us. You know, and it's great, but it's kids that are already involved in the hobby.
Yeah, I make no problems about that. Sure.
You know, we need to work hard to seed the next generation.
Yeah, no, I agree. I admit and acknowledge that I spoke a lot about inward, you know, mentoring the people who are already inside. And I think I think, it's a larger program than it's nice to see me here. It's nice to see the other young people in your club. And, you guys are doing great work, but, one great club is not going to change the landscape. And we need, large national radical action and programming strategically to kind of grow. So I think I feel strongly about that.
Yeah, and now, Jim, let me turn my camera back on so now you can see this great face for radio.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. I should just, there you go. But you ask good questions, and I think one of the things that you mentioned that I'd stress is, a license is not a first step. It's not a second step. I don't even think the license is the third step. I think you have to be, well infected before you put that burden in front of somebody, because to a lot of kids, the license is a burden. That's what it is. And we have and what a lot of, if you want to do contesting, oh great, well now you pass this first license, but actually, that first license we just had you study pretty hard for, you know what you could do with that? Nothing for contesting. Unless you want to be on 10 meters or 15 and 80 CW.
Well, hopefully the ARRL proposal to expand tech privileges into the phone bands and some of the HF spectrum will take some root. And
yeah, I mean, there's been no action.
Then I think that'll give us a good hook. If we can get kids involved and get youngsters involved to help them get into contesting with you and your compatriots, we give them some more of that.
The league formed the entry-level licensing committee to pursue that.
Give them some they talk about incentive licensing, and the incentive licensing program is going away and this and that. And I strongly disagree. I think expanding the tech privileges into HF will only encourage people to want to get licensed, because you get a little taste and then you want more.
Yeah, I mean,
but I digress.
Let's
get them in the door first before
you're spot on there, but I will say that that proposal was filed a while ago and essentially has not been acted on. And I think if that's something people want, people need to be vocal about it, because it's kind of a shame that that there hasn't even been it's been dead in the water. And
it's coming back. It's getting some traction again, and let's see what happens with the FCC in the next year or two. But I'm getting way off course here, so I'll turn it back over and let somebody else talk.
If you want to have a whole other discussion about that, I'd be more than happy to anytime.
I'll let somebody else have a chance.
But
I've spoken enough.
I have a theory that we're probably down in the weeds there enough that not everybody finds that as interesting as you and I might.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Marty. Appreciate your presentation, and thanks for your time.
Other thoughts or other comments, questions, concerns, opinions, theories, complaints, grenades?
Hi, Marty.
Go ahead, Craig.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Craig.
Hey, Marty. Good to speak with you. I'm a middle school teacher, and I have a club at my school.
That's awesome.
And, yeah, it was good to hear you mention that the license is not the priority, because that's not how we structure what we do. We have had students get licensed over the last couple of years, I think 5 or 6 of them, but that's not our priority. Ian sort of answered one of my questions I had for you, and he covered some of those things that you find are interesting for people entering the hobby, especially people in the middle school and high school age bracket. So I appreciated him asking that and kind of getting you going that direction. But you brought up something that I'm really interested in, and you were talking about the branding. What does branding to a middle schooler or a high schooler look like when we're talking about bringing radio and what it has to offer to them? What's that going to look like? And then I have a second question for you that's a little more personal. My son, who's stepped away right now, he's 17. He is a general class license holder. He is decidedly not an operator, but he is decidedly a very hardware oriented person. And I know you've got some hardware and development, on your resume as well. He's very interested in things like the expeditions and the and that aspect of ham radio and contesting, but has zero interest in the actual contesting part. He's more of a hardware guy. How does he transition into getting involved in that aspect of it? So 2 questions: branding, and how does a young person transition into that hardware aspect rather than an operator?
Good question.
I'll mute again.
Good question. So the first thing I want to say is you're an impressive guy to teach middle schoolers. That takes a lot of patience. Start there. You're doing good stuff already. Second thing, I'm actually going to answer that in reverse order. Your son, that's awesome. We need people to be developing hardware and innovative solutions and technology. And from a contesting point of view, I think you got to understand a little bit about the use cases and the applications and the how things are done in practice to be well suited to kind of do that development. I think because I think if you have a little bit of practice, it backs up the theory. As to how to break in, it's real hard. I mean, I think I know that I've sent people to, and I think the Tapper organization, TAPR, if you're familiar with it, does really good work as far as innovation and development in amateur radio. They do a conference every year, and it's kind of a good group of smart, hardware-minded, innovative people. The way I got I'm not sure. I think Craig kind of hinted at this, but I'm besides working in engineering by day a little bit. I sell a product for a contest and a device for controlling 2 radios, and the way that I came to produce it was I made a couple for myself, and then a couple friends said, "Oh, I'd like some of these," and then it kind of grew. So I don't have great advice on how to break in. It's really hard. Amateur radio is it's like breaking into any radio club. Some are easy to break into, some are not. And I think, I don't have great advice for how to get, find people who are doing stuff that you want to get involved with and ask, hey, can I hang out with you? Or, hey, can I help you? Or, hey, can we work together? I know that's hard and it's hard to find those people. And, send me an email. Let me sleep on that one. As for the branding thing and the positioning thing, I think it's the most essential and critical thing we have going on with, amateur radio and attracting young people. We have to position amateur radio in a way that seems interesting and important. And I know a little bit, people hate when I go here, but I think it's totally okay to mention it, which is that, something that has value I don't know, like when I talk to my friends, everything is, am I doing something that's going to have value to me later on? It's going to help me get into college. Is it going to give me academic experiences? Am I going to learn things? And also be fun. And I think if we can position amateur radio as this fun opportunity to learn a lot and do good and get great experiences in a way that's accessible and not scary and crazy, that's a good thing. I think the way the communications channels we go about doing that are varied, be it social media, be it, targeted involvement, be it, stuff from peers. I think that question is to be answered by people who know a lot more about that sort of thing than I do. What I do know is I don't think we're doing any of that. And I listen to I'm going to do a little bit of bashing here, and pardon me, which is the ARRL puts out a podcast called On the Air, and in the first 30 seconds of the podcast, I counted 14 words of ham jargon that if you weren't a radio ham, you wouldn't know what that means. So I think, my point there is we got to make it accessible, and you got to take out the, if you play back a conversation of you explaining amateur radio to somebody, how many times do you use a word that they wouldn't know or they wouldn't understand? And I think, setting off excitement and magic, and then I think it's very compelling when somebody sees something really cool and then they say, I want to do that. How do I do that? I don't quite have my head wrapped around a lot of what I see happening right now.
Marty, I have a comment about your ticket position. When I was first licensed as a tech, I was very happy as a tech for 6 years. I did not feel the need to get a general.
Yep.
And my enjoyment came from Aries.
Yep.
And Aries was almost exclusively UHF VHF.
Yeah.
And therefore, I had a lot of fun with my tech license.
Yes, I agree.
And so, that is a viable option for people who want to get in.
I agree. I think you're right. And I think there's no reason to make people upgrade if they don't feel like they want to do it. I think, I think, there are more people who do, there are more people who do MCOM than are on HF and contest and DX and do all these things combined by an order of magnitude, probably. So I think, I think one of the issues in the messaging and one of the issues in the kind of the larger organizational leadership of amateur radio in this country, I believe, is we spend too much time forgetting about those people. And for lack of a better way of saying it, they're hams too. And I think, sometimes it can be disenfranchising when we forget about those people because they're the majority. I'm not sure I don't think there was quite a question there, but I agree with you. I think, there's no reason that contesting is the only part of the hobby that people have to enjoy. It's just one that I like.
Hey, Marty, Brian, Cape 4 BBL.
Nice call.
I'm curious. Thank you. I'm curious.
Nice backdrop.
Yeah.
What band are you on?
I don't know. I think it's 20. No.
It's on 40. It's on 40.
I'm curious what you want to do for a career.
That's a
great
question.
presentation, by the way.
Good question. I currently, I'm interested I'm in an electrical and computer engineering program. I don't see myself as an engineer for life. I see somebody who leads engineers and doing great things. And I work in the startup world right now, and I'd like to continue on that path of driving innovation and operations. And one of my jobs has me, doing things in finance. And I think engineering is awesome, and I like to be skills I have, but I don't see myself on a workbench for the rest of my life. But I love conceiving of new ideas and then working with smart groups of people to see them through to success. I love learning. So.
Hey, Marty, just
hi. Hey, Wes, how are you?
I'm living the dream. How are you?
I'm living the dream.
Great. Good to see you. Great presentation.
Good to see you.
Just really stunned by some of the statistics that you have there. But you may already know this, but our club, we're in our 11th year now of Ham Jam, where we all the money we get is spent for youth activities and education, scholarships, things like that. In fact, last year, your buddy Bryant was one of our speakers, and we've been financing the DX Adventure for a long time. We helped send Bryant over to WRTC, and we're looking for places to help youth get involved. And when you don't have enough money, come see us. And it's a hard thing to do because there's so many lack of opportunity, I'd have to say, to try to spend our money wisely. And I just wonder what you have to say about that. We were all set to help out on your Youth on the Air this summer for the U.S., but that all fell apart. But still there and waiting. But we need ways to help out.
Yeah, I mean, I think first, thank you for saying that. It's Wes, I'm very grateful for all the places you've traveled and put on the air, and warm and cold places, and everything you do for Ham Jam and everything like that. You're an inspiration and somebody I really look up to. So good question. Answer is, I think, I keep talking about branding and how we can outreach to more people beyond our communities, and I think that's probably a good place to fund. There's nobody really doing that work right now at a larger scale that I know of. And I think the most impact is not just funding, one person doing one thing, but how we can, start larger conversations and movements. I think those smaller things are very important for individualized people. And it's really a shame because I think actually one of the things you're getting at, which is true, is I think there's more people who are willing to invest in that than there are people willing to do the legwork of, I think, people, there are generous people like your club and others, I think, who would love to see a lot of work happen that, frankly, there aren't people doing the work who want the money.
Well, I really enjoy or I really appreciate what Tim Duffy's doing.
Yes.
He's a real inspiration to all of us and what he's been doing for youth.
Yes, I'm very grateful for that. And I think, we're amateur radio. One of the benefits of that demographic slide I showed, which I hope scared you a little bit at least, is that there are a lot of people with a lot of willingness to support in time and energy and otherwise. I don't have a great answer for you. Let me sleep on that one too.
So Marty, on that demographics curve,
Yeah.
there's 2 points on that I think are of interest.
Yep.
One that you spoke of, which is the younger generation, the up and coming kids that will enable this hobby to continue for decades beyond. But there's another group that would fall into the category that Fred, W4FRA, was talking about earlier. Those are the folks that are starting to retire and don't quite have something to do.
Yeah.
They could easily get into emergency communications.
Yeah.
It's low cost and immediately gets them out doing fun stuff like
moving
bicycle
around,
rides,
getting outside.
Yep, and meeting people, etc. And then from there, they can go in multiple directions. And I think that there's a secondary benefit to that because if grandpa gets in there and grandpa's on his radio, grandpa can probably start inspiring the grandkids to maybe talk on the radio and say hi to somebody. And I've done this with my nieces and nephews. Is I put them on the air and had them call CQ and see what's the furthest station they could contact. So one niece got Long Island, the other one got Puerto Rico, and then I had them contest challenging each other to see how far they could get on the radio. But so I think there's those 2 entry points are viable, and more so the latter one, the folks that are just about to retire, looking for a hobby. I think that's an area that should be looked at, targeted, promoted, etc.
Yeah, I think I think there are outreach opportunities to people at all different stages in life, and I think what the people have as far as time and resources and interests are varied. And I think you're right. I think we're not doing a lot of that outreach, to be quite frank. But I think you're right.
Any other questions for Marty?
Have I managed to put you guys to sleep? Has this yacker from Boston succeeded?
No, we all needed a nap. It's okay.
I'll throw back in to follow up on what Jim W4IU just said. And
you guys are great, by the way. I just got to say.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I say that my intro to amateur radio was a missed opportunity when I was a teenager. I babysat for a family when I was 13, 14. That dad is still an active ham in coastal South Carolina. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. Dad retired and they moved down to Charleston, to the Charleston area, but he's still active. And I floored him right after not long after I got licensed. I was in one of either the CQ or the ARRL DX contest, the big worldwide, and he was down in the Bahamas working, and I floored him because I answered his CQ and was like, "Oh, is this Steve?" And he's like, "Who are you and how do you know who I am?" And then I introduced myself. So it was a nice reunion. But what I was going to tag on with what Jim said was actually, I wasn't a kid. I was married and well on my way when I got licensed. But it was because my father-in-law, who's also a member of this club, has been licensed for 27, 28 years, whatever. And anytime we'd get in his truck to go somewhere, the first thing he'd do is reach over and turn on his 2-meter rig and see who's on the club repeater. And see, morning on a Saturday, middle of the day Saturday, whatever. So there was, in those days there was a little more activity, but finally one was just like, having all the fun when we get in the car. I can't let him have all the fun. And that's what got me involved and got me to get my licenses. And as a lot of people in this club will happily attest to you, the world hasn't been the same since. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But,
I would.
But that's how we do it. That's part of how we do it is exposure.
Right. I mean, I think the story I always like to tell when somebody talks about the babysitters, the babies, the kid's father or whatever. The story I say is, I came to school one day and said, tonight I'm going to go take my ham radio test. And my science teacher, who I was very, very close to at the time, it was her first year teaching, and I was fairly young, and I went to an extremely kind of funky, newfangled school at the time, said, oh, my dad's a ham. Let me introduce you guys. And she never did. That's okay. And I was running on 20 meters in a contest. But I knew what his call sign was. She told me what his call sign was. His call was KD1CT. And one day I was contesting running stations. It was actually the same contest that I was doing last week at the North American QSO party, but the January edition in 2019, which is my favorite contest of the year. And I was running a 200 and something hour on 20 meters. And who calls in but Jess's father? He was floored. I remember her telling him, that my student is thinking about getting an amateur radio license, and here we are working each other on 20 meters. It's kind of those experiences when you know somebody all your life or know somebody a little bit and don't know that they're ham, and then you find out. I think it's the coolest parts. I just got a text message, I can speak, from one of my twin sister's girlfriends, one of her besties, saying, my brother just got into ham radio. My house is a mess. Can you talk to him? So I was, just before I got on with you guys, I had dug out my, I even got a prop for this. I dug out my trusty 2-meter radio, which has not been on in a long time. We had a nice chat on the repeater and talked about things like how, his Chinese radio with the he was struggling to get into the repeater because his vertical antenna was stuck out the window horizontally. How we can turn that vertical and all that. Very basic elmering. So it was a lot of fun, and I got to hear a repeater again for the first time in a little bit. So I try and be a well-rounded ham, and sometimes it's nice to get back to the roots.
Any other questions for Marty?
Yeah, I got one.
We got one. Shoot. I can duck.
No. How do you say, what's the name of that town that you live in?
I live in Waban, Massachusetts, which is a
Waban.
village.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. That was the question?
That was it.
That was an easy question to answer. That's good. That wasn't hard. I didn't need a duck.
We had to give you a bonus.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the first round practice question. Well, thank you so much for everybody for coming out here. I just have so much fun talking to you guys and seeing Wes and getting to meet Jim after all of our emails back and forth. It's just a blast. And I like to say there's nothing more ham radio than just talking, right? So this was a lot of fun.
Well, Marty, we've been duly impressed. Just going out and finding your LinkedIn page. Wow. I've seen pages similar to that, but not from an 18-year-old. So my hat's off to you, sir.
Well, thank you.
But we want to recognize you for
thank you.
Talking to us and sharing your insights and thoughts on youth and contesting. Appreciate it very much. And we look forward to talking to you on the air or having you back for additional sessions.
Well, when COVID is all over, I'd love to come visit you guys in person and get to meet all these faces off of the Zoom screen. This has really been a lot of fun, and that's very kind of you. Thank you so much. It's so much fun to get to, after a long day of work today, to get to plop on and get to meet another bunch of hams from the other side of the country, and know that I don't live near you. I do different things, but we have so much in common, and can laugh about the same joke. So it's always fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.